The text arrived at exactly 6:02 a.m. It was from my older sister, Sarah. 4 words that shattered my entire reality. Don't go home today. I thought she was joking. I thought she was overreacting. But by midnight, as blue sirens painted my childhood home, I finally understood why. The fluorescent lights of Street, Jude's emergency room always gave me a headache by the end of a 12-hour shift, but on that crisp October morning, the throbbing behind my eyes was instantly replaced by a cold knot of adrenaline. I was standing at the nurse's station, peeling off my scrubs and preparing for the 40-minute drive back to the Newton duplex I shared with my older sister. Sarah lived upstairs with her husband, Thomas, while I rented out the fully renovated basement apartment. It was a perfect arrangement. We were close enough to share Sunday dinners, but separated by enough drywall to maintain our privacy. My phone buzzed against the hard laminate of the desk. I glanced down, expecting a text from my boyfriend, Liam, or maybe an automated alert from my bank. Instead, it was Sarah. Sarah, don't go home today. I blinked, my exhausted brain struggling to process the command. As a senior auditor for a major accounting firm, her entire personality was built around logic, spreadsheets, and predictability. Me, what? Did the pipes burst again? I'm exhausted, Sarah. I just want my bed. I watched the 3 little typing bubbles appear, disappear, and reappear. When her response finally came through, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Sarah, I am not joking, Chloe. Turn off your location tracking right now. Go to Liam's. Do not come back to the house under any circumstances. I'll explain when I can. A chill washed over me. My fingers fumbled as I immediately hit the call button on her contact profile. It rang exactly half a time before going straight to voicemail. She had declined the call. Everything okay, Chloe? I jumped. Jessica, the charge nurse, was looking at me over the rims of her reading glasses, a half-empty cup of burnt coffee in her hand. I think so, I stammered, pulling my coat tight around my shoulders. Sarah is just being weird. Probably a fight with Thomas. Ah, the joys of marriage, Jessica smirked, turning back to her charts. Get some sleep. You look like a ghost. I walked out into the freezing pre-dawn air, the sky bruised with purple and dull gray. Sitting in the driver's seat of my Honda, I stared at my phone. The silence from Sarah was deafening. I swiped down to my control center and, despite feeling ridiculous, turned off my GPS and location sharing. Then, I opened my text thread with Thomas. Thomas was a polished, high-earning pharmaceutical rep. We had never been particularly close. He found me a bit chaotic, and I found him stiff and arrogant, but we were cordial. Me, hey Thomas, is Sarah okay? She sent me a weird text about not coming home. His reply came less than a minute later. Thomas, hey Chloe, sorry about that. She woke up with a killer migraine and is totally out of it. Took some heavy meds and is dead to the world right now. You know how she gets when she's sick, paranoid, and rambling. Just a heads up, the plumber is coming today to look at the upstairs guest bath, so it might be noisy anyway. Enjoy Liam's. I stared at the screen, a deep, primal sense of unease taking root in my stomach. Dead to the world right now. If Sarah was heavily medicated and fast asleep, how had she just texted me a coherent, terrifying warning less than 10 minutes ago? And Sarah didn't get paranoid when she had migraines. She just locked herself in a dark room with an ice pack. Furthermore, the upstairs guest bathroom had been completely gutted and remodeled just 3 months ago. Why would a plumber be coming? Nothing added up. I started the engine, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Instead of taking the highway ramp towards Newton, I took the detour toward downtown Boston. I was going to Liam's apartment. Something was deeply, horribly wrong in my house, and my sister was trapped inside it. Liam's apartment was a messy haven of unfinished law school textbooks and stale pizza boxes. He had already left for his morning classes by the time I let myself in with my spare key. The silence of his apartment only amplified the deafening noise in my head. I had been pacing the length of his faded rug for 4 hours, drinking terrible instant coffee and staring at my phone. I had sent Sarah 6 messages. None of them had delivered. Her phone was off. I sat heavily on the edge of the sofa and opened the Ring camera app. Sarah and I shared an account, so we could both keep an eye on our respective packages. I figured I could look at the driveway camera to see if this supposed plumber had arrived or if Thomas had left for work. The app loaded, spinning the little blue circle for a few seconds before kicking me to the login screen. Session expired. Please log in. Frowning, I typed in my password. Incorrect password. Please try again. My blood ran cold. The password had been the same for 3 years. The name of our childhood dog followed by our mother's birth year. Someone had changed it, and it certainly wasn't Sarah, who was supposedly dead to the world upstairs. Panic, sharp and metallic, tasted bitter in the back of my throat. I couldn't just sit here anymore. I dialed the local Newton Police Precinct's non-emergency line. I didn't want to call 911 and send a blaring siren to the house if Thomas was just being a controlling jerk, but I needed eyes on my sister. Newton Police, Officer Reynolds speaking. Hi. I kept my voice steady, though my hand was shaking. I'd like to request a wellness check at 42 Elmwood Drive. My sister, Sarah Holden, lives there. She sent me some concerning messages this morning, and now her phone is off. Holden. Elmwood Drive. Okay, ma'am. I'll dispatch a patrol car to knock on the door. Give us about 30 minutes and I'll call you back with an update. The next 30 minutes were agonizing. I imagined 100 different scenarios, each worse than the last. Had Thomas snapped? Was there a home invasion? Were they being held hostage? When my phone finally rang, I answered it before the first chime finished. Hello? Hi, is this Chloe? It's Officer Reynolds. Yes. Did you see her? Is she okay? Ma'am, you can take a deep breath. Officer Davis just cleared the scene. He spoke with your brother-in-law, Thomas, and your sister, Sarah. They're both perfectly fine. I stopped pacing. Wait, he spoke to Sarah? Directly? Yes, ma'am. He said she looked a bit under the weather, wrapped in a blanket, looked like she had the flu, but she came to the door, identified herself, and confirmed she was safe and didn't need police assistance. Her husband mentioned she accidentally sent a text meant for a contractor to you while she was groggy on NyQuil. A contractor? I echoed, my voice hollowing out. Yes, apparently they're having some plumbing issues. Anyway, no signs of distress. Have a good afternoon, ma'am. The line clicked dead. I stood paralyzed in Liam's living room. The police had seen her. She was alive. She was at the door. I should have felt relieved, right? I should have laughed at my own exhaustion-fueled paranoia, gone to sleep, and scolded Sarah later. But I knew my sister. I knew the way she typed, the way she thought, and the way she operated. She would never mix up a text to me with a text to a contractor. Turn off your location tracking. You don't say that to a plumber. And then, a memory violently shoved its way to the forefront of my mind. When we were kids, our father was an unpredictable alcoholic. We developed a survival system. If Dad was raging downstairs and it wasn't safe for me to come out of my room, Sarah would slip a note under my door. She never wrote, "Dad is drunk." She always wrote, "The basement is flooding." I lunged for my phone and opened my text thread with Sarah. I scrolled past the terrifying 6 a.m. messages, back to yesterday afternoon, before my night shift. Sarah. Yesterday. 4:15 p. Hey, Chloe. Can you grab milk on your way home tomorrow morning? Also, check the weather. Looks like heavy rain. The basement might flood. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It hadn't rained in a week. The forecast was clear for the next 10 days. She had planted the warning yesterday. She knew something was going to happen before it happened. Whoever the police saw at that door, wrapped in a blanket, groggy and hiding her face, was either terrified into submission or it wasn't Sarah at all. I grabbed my car keys. I didn't care what the police said. I didn't care what Thomas said. I was going home. By 2 p.m., I parked my Honda 2 streets over from Elmwood Drive, tucking it behind a row of dense privacy hedges near the community park. If Thomas was watching for my car, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing it. I walked the rest of the way on foot, utilizing the suburban camouflage of tall fences and overgrown autumn foliage. I slipped through Mrs. Gable's unlocked side gate, an elderly neighbor who was currently wintering in Florida, and navigated her backyard until I reached the wooden slat fence separating her property from ours. Crouching low, I peered through the gaps in the wood. The house looked deceptively quiet. All the blinds were drawn tightly shut. But my eyes immediately locked onto the driveway. Thomas's sleek Audi was gone. Instead, parked aggressively close to the garage door, was a beat-up, dark blue Ford Explorer with heavily tinted windows. It had out-of-state plates and a massive dent in the rear bumper. I had never seen that vehicle in my life. With my pulse thundering in my ears, I hopped the fence, landing softly on the damp grass of my own backyard. I pressed my back against the vinyl siding of the house, edging my way toward the basement window well. If I could just get into my apartment, I could listen through the air vents. I could figure out who the hell was upstairs with my sister. I reached the window, dropping down into the leaf-filled well, and pressed my face to the glass. I pressed my face against the cold, dirt-streaked glass of the basement window well, cupping my hands around my eyes to block out the afternoon glare. It took a second for my vision to adjust to the dim interior, but when it did, the breath was knocked out of my lungs. My meticulously kept apartment had been completely ransacked. The cushions of my beige sectional were ripped from their bases and slashed open, tufts of white polyfill scattered across the rug like fresh snow. My bookshelves were emptied, novels and nursing textbooks thrown haphazardly onto the floor. Even the framed photos on my wall had been torn down, the glass shattered. Whoever was in the house wasn't just fixing plumbing. They were looking for something, and they were desperate. A surge of protective rage momentarily overrode my terror. I needed to get inside. I reached up and pressed my palms against the top of the window frame. Last winter, I had locked myself out after a grueling night shift and discovered that this specific window's latch was faulty. If you pushed up hard enough on the left corner, the locking mechanism would slip. I pushed with all my strength, my boots slipping against the damp dead leaves at the bottom of the well. With a sharp metallic click, the window gave way, sliding upward. I squeezed myself through the narrow opening, tumbling headfirst onto the carpet of my bedroom. I lay frozen for a full minute, listening. The house above me was a heavy, oppressive structure, but it wasn't silent. The rhythmic, heavy thud of footsteps vibrated through the ceiling. Someone was pacing back and forth in the living room directly above me. Slowly, agonizingly, I pushed myself off the floor. I slipped off my boots, leaving them in the corner so I could move silently in my socks. The air down here felt thick, laced with the metallic scent of exposed drywall dust and the faint, acrid smell of cigarette smoke. Neither Sarah nor Thomas smoked. I crept out of my bedroom and into the small hallway, positioning myself directly beneath the main HVAC intake vent. When we were teenagers, Sarah and I used to use the ductwork to talk to each other after our parents sent us to bed. The metal shafts carried sound perfectly. I held my breath, straining to hear. "She's lying, Arthur." A rough, gravelly voice echoed down the aluminum shaft. "We've torn the master bedroom apart. We pulled up the floorboards in the office. It's not here." "Then look again, Mitchell," a second man replied. His voice was chillingly calm, smooth, and laced with a quiet authority. "This must be Arthur. Mr. Sterling is running out of patience. And so am I." She didn't have time to take it to the firm. There was a heavy thud, followed by a sharp, muffled gasp. My hands flew to my mouth to stifle my own cry. It was Sarah. "Look at me, Mrs. Holden," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. "Your husband made a very foolish mistake. He thought he could dip into our accounts without anyone noticing. He siphoned off $4 million over 2 years. Now, we just want the flash drive with the audit trails. Thomas said you found it. He said you brought it home to confront him." "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah's voice floated down the vent, weak and trembling, yet laced with that stubborn defiance I knew so well. "I'm a senior auditor for Deloitte. If I found discrepancies in Thomas's pharmaceutical shell companies, I would have reported it to the SEC, not brought it home." "Don't play games," Mitchell barked. Thomas called us the second he realized the drive was missing from his safe. He bolted because he knew what we'd do to him. But he left you behind to take the fall. So, where is it? My stomach plummeted, a sickening wave of nausea washing over me. Thomas wasn't a hostage. Thomas was the catalyst. He had been stealing from some very dangerous people, money launderers, cartel associates, whoever Arthur and Mitchell worked for, and Sarah, brilliant, meticulous Sarah, had found the proof. Thomas had fled like a coward, leaving his wife to face the monsters he invited to their door. And the police? The woman they saw wrapped in a blanket, groggy on NyQuil? It must have been Sarah, forced to smile and dismiss the cops with a gun pressed to her spine, just out of sight. "I told you," Sarah rasped, coughing weakly. "I don't have it." "She's stalling," Mitchell growled. "Let me break her fingers. She needs her hands to type her little spreadsheets. She'll talk." "Patience, Mitchell," Arthur sighed. "Check the basement again." The sister's apartment. Thomas said she might have hidden it down there. "I already tossed the place. It's just cheap furniture and nursing scrubs." "Do it again. Tear the drywall down if you have to." Panic seized me, sharp and cold. Footsteps were already moving toward the top of the basement stairs. I had less than 30 seconds before Mitchell came down here. I needed to hide, but more importantly, I needed to figure out where Sarah had hidden the drive. The basement might flood. The cryptic text from yesterday screamed in my mind. The basement might flood. It was a warning about the danger, yes, but Sarah was an auditor. She left paper trails. She left clues. She wouldn't just use a code phrase for danger. She would use it to tell me a location. Flood, water. My eyes darted around my wrecked living room, landing on the louvered doors of the utility closet in the corner. The sump pump. I scrambled across the carpet, ignoring the sting of a shattered picture frame grazing my knee. Inside sat the massive water heater, the humming HVAC unit, and in the far corner, a circular plastic lid covering the sump pump basin built into the concrete floor. The heavy, wooden basement door at the top of the stairs creaked open with a groan that seemed to echo through my very bones. "Keep an eye on her, Arthur." Mitchell's heavy boots began to descend the wooden steps. Thump, thump, thump. I dropped to my knees beside the sump pump, my hands shaking violently as I gripped the edges of the plastic lid. It was sealed tight with years of grime. I pulled with everything I had, the plastic scraping against concrete. It popped loose just as Mitchell reached the bottom of the stairs. I froze, trapped in the narrow utility closet, shielded from the main room only by the angled water heater. If he walked 3 feet to his left, he would see me. "Smells like a damn sewer down here," Mitchell muttered. A bright beam of light swept across the floor just inches from my feet as he clicked on a heavy-duty tactical flashlight. I carefully reached my hand into the dark, damp hole of the sump basin. The water was frigid, slick with mud and rust. My fingers blindly traced the corrugated plastic of the drainage pipe. Nothing. I felt around the float switch mechanism. Nothing. "Come on, Sarah. Where did you put it?" I reached higher, feeling along the dry underside of the plastic lid I had just removed. My fingertips brushed against something thick and tacky. Duct tape. A small, square object was taped directly beneath the handle indent of the lid. I peeled it off as silently as I could. It was a small, heavy-duty Ziploc bag. Inside, silhouetted in the dim light, was a silver Kingston USB flash drive. I had it. The proof. The $4 million ledger. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the basement as Mitchell kicked my overturned coffee table. "There's nothing here, Arthur," he yelled up the stairs, his voice booming in the confined space. "Just torn up pillows and trash." "Look in the ceiling tiles," Arthur yelled back. "Check the utility closet." My blood turned to ice. I clutched the plastic baggie to my chest and pressed my back flat against the concrete wall behind the water heater. The beam of Mitchell's flashlight swung violently toward the louvered doors. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering so violently against my ribs I was certain he could hear it. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Deliberate. Crunch. He stepped on a piece of broken glass, right outside the closet. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I calculated my odds. I had my heavy steel-toed nursing clogs by the window. If he opened the door, I would have to blind him with whatever I could reach, maybe a bottle of drain cleaner on the shelf, and make a run for the window. I would probably die, but I had to try. The louvered doors rattled as Mitchell's hand grasped the knob. Suddenly, a massive, deafening thud shook the ceiling above, followed by the sound of breaking glass and a woman's scream. "Hey!" Arthur roared from the living room upstairs. "Grab her, she's going for the door." Mitchell abandoned the closet knob instantly. He swore violently, his heavy boots pounding back up the wooden stairs with terrifying speed. The basement door slammed shut behind him. I let out a ragged, silent exhale, my entire body trembling so hard my teeth chattered. Sarah had created a distraction. Even beaten and terrified, she was calculating our odds. She knew I was down here. She must have heard the faint scrape of the window or the sump pump lid. I shoved the Ziploc bag deep into the front pocket of my scrubs. I had the drive, but I couldn't just climb out the window and run to the police. Thomas had managed to convince the cops that Sarah was fine just hours ago. These men were professionals. If a SWAT team rolled up, Arthur and Mitchell would kill Sarah and slip out the back. I needed leverage, or I needed a way to get the police inside the house immediately, without giving the men time to react. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. It was still on airplane mode to prevent location tracking. I carefully toggled the Wi-Fi back on, praying my home network was still functioning. The little bars appeared. I opened the Ring app again. The password was still changed. But then, I remembered something else. When Thomas had the upstairs guest bathroom renovated 3 months ago, he had been paranoid about the contractors stealing his expensive cologne and watches. He had installed a hidden, motion-activated nanny cam, disguised as a USB wall charger in the upstairs hallway, directly facing the master bedroom door. He had bragged about it at dinner one night. Sarah, furious at the invasion of privacy, had forced him to give her the login credentials. She had shared them with me in a ranting text message complaining about his paranoia. I opened my Photos app, frantically scrolling through my screenshots folder until I found the text from August. Username: Holden Otto Otto. Password: AlphaDog Uno. I downloaded the third-party camera app, my hands slick with sweat, and typed in the credentials. The screen buffered, then snapped into crisp, high-definition color. The camera was positioned right outside the master bedroom. In the frame, I could see the upstairs landing and the top of the main staircase. Arthur was standing by the railing, fixing the cuffs of his expensive tailored suit. He looked calm, unbothered. Mitchell was standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, dragging a limp figure by the arm. It was Sarah. Her face was bruised, her lip bleeding, and her hands were zip-tied behind her back. She looked terrified, but as she locked eyes with the hidden camera in the wall charger, I saw a flicker of that ironclad resolve. She tried to run. "A futile effort," Arthur replied smoothly, pulling a suppressed handgun from his suit jacket. "We are out of time, Mrs. Holden. If you don't tell me where the drive is in the next 60 seconds, I will shoot you in the knee. And then I will go down to that basement, and I will wait for your little sister to come home from her shift at the hospital. I hear nurses have a high pain tolerance. Shall we test that theory?" A cold, dark clarity washed over me in the shadows of the basement. I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was going to war. The timer in my head started ticking. 60 seconds. That's all my older sister had before Caleb, the impeccably dressed monster holding the suppressed pistol, shattered her knee. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, watching the live feed from the hallway camera. My sister was on her knees, head bowed, but she wasn't crying. She was calculating, just like she always did. I needed to act. But charging up the stairs with a bottle of bleach and a pair of trauma shears was a suicide mission. They would gun me down before I reached the top step. I needed the police, but a standard 911 call wouldn't work fast enough. The precinct was a 10-minute drive away, and Caleb was going to pull that trigger in 45 seconds. Then, my eyes darted to the top right corner of the third-party camera app, a small microphone icon. The two-way audio. Thomas had used it once to yell at the dog for chewing the rug. I pressed the icon. The app asked for microphone permissions. I hit allow. At the same time, I grabbed my smartwatch, a cheap fitness tracker Liam had bought me for my birthday, and paired it with my phone. I dialed 911 directly from the watch, praying the Bluetooth connection would hold in the basement. 911. What is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled faintly from my wrist. This is a silent emergency, I whispered into my watch, barely breathing. Two armed men are holding my sister hostage at 42 Elmwood Drive. They have a suppressed handgun. The earlier wellness check was a forced hostage situation. I am inside the house. Send SWAT immediately. They are going to shoot her in 30 seconds. Ma'am, stay on the line. I muted the watch. I didn't have time to argue or explain. I looked back at my phone screen. Caleb was raising the gun, aiming it down at my sister's leg. Time is up, he said smoothly. I pressed the microphone button on the camera app. Drop the gun, Caleb. My voice boomed through the tiny speaker in the upstairs hallway. In the confined space of the second floor, the digitized, disembodied voice sounded terrifyingly loud. On the screen, Caleb and Mitchell froze. Mitchell spun around, his tactical flashlight sweeping the empty hallway, searching for the source of the sound. Caleb's hand wavered, his eyes darting to the ceiling. Who the hell is that? Mitchell barked, raising his own weapon. It's Chloe, I said, my voice eerily calm as it projected through the walls. I'm not at the hospital. I'm in the house, and I have the flash drive. My sister's head snapped up, her eyes widening in horror, as she stared directly at the wall charger where the camera was hidden. She knew exactly what I was doing. The little nurse, Caleb mused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He lowered the gun from my sister's knee and pointed it at the ceiling. How very brave of you, Chloe. The attic? I'm holding the drive right now. I lied, keeping my tone steady. The Kingston USB, $4 million of Thomas's dirty money. If you shoot her, I snap it in half and flush it down the toilet. You go back to your boss with absolutely nothing. Mitchell looked at Caleb, panic flashing in his rough features. She's bluffing. She doesn't have it. I found it taped under the sump pump lid in the basement, I said. Silence descended on the upstairs hallway. On the screen, I watched Caleb's smile vanish. He knew I wasn't bluffing anymore. I had given him the exact, impossible location. Mitchell, Caleb ordered, his voice suddenly urgent. Get down to the basement, now. Mitchell bolted toward the stairs. This was it. I had pulled the trigger on my own trap. I dropped my phone, grabbed the plastic baggie holding the flash drive, and scrambled toward the basement window. I had a 10-second head start. I vaulted up, grabbing the ledge of the window well, and hauled myself through the narrow opening just as the heavy wooden door at the top of the basement stairs burst open. She's at the window. Mitchell roared from the bottom of the stairs, the beam of his flashlight catching my leg as I kicked wildly to free myself. I tumbled out onto the damp grass of the backyard, my scrubs soaked and covered in mud. I scrambled to my feet, my lungs burning as I sprinted toward the side gate. I could hear the basement window shattering behind me as Mitchell tried to force his massive frame through the tight space. I threw myself over Mrs. Gable's fence, landing hard on my shoulder. Pain flared up my arm, but adrenaline drowned it out. I kept running, tearing through the overgrown hedges, sprinting blindly toward the street. From my wrist, the 911 dispatcher's voice was frantic. Ma'am? Ma'am, units are pulling up to your street now. Are you safe? I broke through the final line of bushes and stumbled onto the pavement of Elmwood Drive. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved as I looked down the block. 2 Newton police cruisers were skidding to a halt in front of my house, their lights off to maintain the element of surprise, but their presence unmistakable. Officers were pouring out, weapons drawn, stacking up by the front door. But as I stood there, gasping for air, clutching the flash drive in my pocket, I saw something else. Parked half a block away, Idling in the shadows beneath a broken street lamp was a familiar vehicle, a silver Audi. Thomas's car. The twist hit me with the force of a physical blow. Thomas hadn't fled the state in terror. He hadn't run away to hide from Caleb and Mitchell. He was right here. He had been sitting outside the neighborhood the entire time. As I watched, the driver's side window rolled down an inch. I saw the glow of a cigarette, and the unmistakable profile of my brother-in-law staring intensely at the front door of our house. It all clicked into place. The horrific truth of the 6 a.m. text. Thomas hadn't just stolen money. He had been caught by his dangerous associates, and he had offered them a trade. The money was gone, but the audit trail was on that drive. He didn't know where my sister had hidden it, so he let Caleb and Mitchell into the house to extract the information from her. He was waiting out here for them to finish the dirty work, grab the drive, and leave. He had sacrificed his own wife to save his own skin. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me. I didn't run to the cops at my front door. I walked straight down the middle of the street, directly toward the silver Audi. Thomas saw me approaching in his rearview mirror. The brake lights flared red as he shifted the car into drive, panicking, but he was blocked in by a parked garbage truck on one side and the approaching SWAT van on the other. I stepped in front of his headlights, raising my hand. In my palm, illuminated by the halogen beams, was the silver Kingston flash drive. Thomas's face went pale behind the windshield. He threw the car into park and shoved the door open. "Chloe," he hissed, looking frantically toward the house where police were now breaching the front door. "Give me that. You don't understand what's happening." "I understand everything," I said, my voice trembling with disgust. "You sold her out. You let them torture her while you sat out here listening to a podcast. They were going to kill me," he pleaded, taking a step toward me. "Give me the drive, Chloe. We can all walk away from this." "No," I whispered. Behind us, the sound of shouting erupted from the house. "Police, drop your weapons, get on the ground." Caleb and Mitchell had been caught. Thomas lunged for me, his hands outstretched, desperate to grab the drive. But I stepped back, and with a swift, violent motion, I threw the heavy metal flash drive directly into the open storm drain at the edge of the curb. It hit the metal grate with a heavy clink and slipped through the bars, disappearing into the rushing wastewater below. Thomas let out a guttural scream of pure despair, dropping to his knees on the wet asphalt. He clawed at the iron grate, his pristine fingernails breaking against the heavy metal, but it was gone. The only leverage he had left to buy his life back from the cartel was floating into the Newton sewer system. "Hey!" A flashlight beam hit us from down the street. 2 officers were running toward us, weapons raised, hands in the air. "Get on the ground." I slowly raised my hands, looking down at the pathetic, broken man crying over a storm drain. "He's the one you want," I told the officers as they tackled Thomas to the pavement, cuffing him roughly. He set the whole thing up. I didn't stay to watch them drag him away. I turned and ran back toward the house. The front lawn was a chaotic mess of blue and red flashing lights, crackling radios, and shouting officers. A paramedic team was wheeling a stretcher out the front door. I pushed past the police tape. "That's my sister! Let me through!" An officer tried to stop me, but the paramedic nodded. I rushed to the side of the stretcher. My sister looked terrible. Her face was swollen, her lips split, and her wrists were bruised purple from the zip ties. But her eyes were open, and they were sharp. She looked up at me, taking in my mud-stained scrubs and wild hair. "You didn't go to Liam's," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "I'm a terrible listener," I replied, grabbing her hand and squeezing it tight. A tear finally broke free, tracing a hot path down my freezing cheek. "The drive?" she coughed. "Gone," I smiled fiercely. "And Thomas is going away for a very long time, either to federal prison or somewhere much worse when his boss finds out he lost the money and the leverage." She closed her eyes, a small, painful smile touching the corners of her mouth. As the paramedics loaded her into the back of the ambulance, I stood on the curb, the flashing blue lights reflecting in the puddles of the street. The house, my sanctuary, was a crime scene. My life was irreparably altered. But we had survived the nightmare. By midnight, the blue sirens faded, leaving the street in eerie silence. Thomas is facing federal charges, though he spends every day terrified of who might find him inside. My sister moved out, taking a job in London to escape the memories. We survived the darkest day of our lives, but I still flinch every time my phone buzzes at 6 a.m.